wrestling today is very different. Maybe it's for the best, maybe it's for the worst, only you can decide. What is certainly a plus is that fans aren't getting so rolled up at the bad guys that they actually try and kill them. Yep, that's what we are going to talk about on this very day. But way back when there was a definite blur between fiction and reality, the villains of the piece would find a way to upset the audience so much that they decided the world would be better if these individuals should leave it permanently. I mean, that is crazy. It's also a very good sign that you've done an amazing job. You literally convinced someone to sacrifice their freedom to get rid of you. My word. So strap yourself in, allow me to introduce myself as Simon from What Culture, and this is 8 wrestlers who were nearly killed by fans. Number 8, Sabu. Sabu was a little bit nuts. If you saw him in ECW, you will know this, and the extreme path he took in the early 90s is still crazy to watch today. It's not like anybody's outdone him. He took being the suicidal, homicidal maniac very seriously. What many may not be so familiar with is his time in Japanese promotion FMW, which you may be interested to know was operated by the Yakuza. The Japanese mafia would often buy out whole sections of the floor with the intention of selling those tickets at inflated prices, or if they fancied it, attending the show en masse. The latter was the case at one event, and so the wrestlers were told, do not spill into this section and fight, because the people there will not appreciate it at all, and you could die. You'd think this would be enough to deter Sabu, but go back to what we said at the start of this entry. He totally ignored it and not only brawled here, but even dived into it. Just to sum it up, what followed can only be described as a riot. The whole show fell apart as this melee spread to the locker room, and it got really bad when a member of the flippin' Yakuza was more than happy to get a steel chair and try and ruin Sabu's head. Amazingly, Mike Awesome jumped in to stop this, and somehow it was all diffused. Do not misunderstand this though. If that hadn't have happened, Sabu would have likely been flying back to America without a limb. Number 7, Ollie Anderson. Ollie Anderson was so good at getting under the fans' skin, one particular night in Greensboro, North Carolina nearly ended in tragedy. After he and fake brother Gene failed to win the NWA tag team titles when they faced Tim Woods and Dino Bravo, somebody in the crowd took a piece out of Ollie with a damn knife. This dude was 79 years old, so he had bought in hard, and it left Anderson pretty badly hurt, as it would. He had to go to hospital and undergo surgery to repair tendons in his left arm. Still real to me, damn it. While he should have sat back and rested, that is just not old school wrestling. So just 2 days later, he was back shooting more tapings, as even the lead announcer told us that nothing could slow Anderson down. Who could argue with that? What had actually happened though is that this OAP had been caught in a scuffle between fans throwing chairs at wrestlers, with the wrestlers responding in kind, because that's just what went down back in the day. It's also why no charges were brought against him. Everyone decided that wrestling was bonkers to begin with, so let's just move on. But Ole loved that. Number 6, Pedro Sabata. You know it's bad when you go to a wrestling match and end up in jail, and that's what happened on the 16th of March 1962 in Florence, Alabama, when a fan lunged at Mexican wrestler Pedro Sabata with a knife. With a 750-strong crowd in the venue that night to see Sabata tag with Mario Galento against Guy Mitchell and Happy Humphreys, who sounds lovely, one decided he didn't want to be on the sidelines, got in the ring, and stabbed his weapon into Pedro. The referee tried to intervene but got punched, so I suppose at least that's in line to what you expect from wrestling. And even though Sabata was able to throw his attacker over the ropes, he unsurprisingly then collapsed. Rushed to hospital, he was in a critical condition with 9 stab wounds to the back, shoulder, forearm, and even his flippin' thumb. Just think how much you need to wave a knife around to do that. He somehow recovered and went on to wrestle for another 2 decades, whereas his assailant was charged with attempted murder, which is absolutely what this was. Number 5, Killer Kowalski. The man who trained Triple H and a beast in his own right, Vladek Kowalski, as he was known in October 1952, would actually make his career based on an incident that could have gone very badly indeed. Whilst wrestling with Yukon Eric in Montreal, Kowalski leaped off the rope to deliver a knee to his opponent's cauliflower ear. At first he thought he'd missed, until he raised his head and eyes and saw said ear rolling along the ring canvas. That is straight up disgusting. Wanting to see how his fallen foe was doing, Kowalski went to check up on him the next night in hospital, and yet when he spied the giant Yukon wrapped like a mummy in a small bed, he burst out laughing. Both found the humor in this, but as the press had accompanied Kowalski to this mating, their headlines were all about how he had laughed at his rival and that he was not only an animal, but a killer, and the rest is history. It was also, however, a curse. Many fans decided that this new nickname meant they could do whatever they wanted when he was in the ring, including throwing pigs' ears at him, pelting him with pea shooters, and he even got burned. Once again though, the worst of these is when he was stabbed. Approached by a would-be fan after a match, the woman told Kowalski she was happy he hadn't gotten hurt during his fight, which sounds nice. Unfortunately, she said this because she wanted to do the hurting and stabbed him in the back. Jeez. From this point, Kowalski often showed up to events with a police escort. Can you really blame him? Number 4, Blackjack Mulligan. Pedro Morales was so beloved during his prime that his fan base decided they should kill on his behalf. What the flub? Let's go to 1971 in Boston. On this night, Pedro went up against a pretty new Blackjack Mulligan who was managed by the Grand Wizard. Even though he was essentially a rookie, Mulligan had found a way to get the crowd all mad, and how he treated Morales so far pissed them off. The Massachusetts audience were ready to see him take a pounding. Just in case that didn't happen, however, they had a plan B, which was stabbing him in the thigh as he walked to the ring. Blackjack went down because of course he did, and it was such a serious and worrying situation that Gorilla Monsoon of all people broke kayfabe to make sure his friend was alright. Good guys and bad guys be damned. If it wasn't bad enough, it got worse too because the knife was covered in pig fat just so it could do as much damage as possible. Not only did Mulligan lose loads of blood, but he got an infection to boot. Thankfully this didn't kill him, which it could have done, but he did lose the match. Really doesn't matter, but in case you're keeping score. Number 3, Roddy Piper. If you knew anything about Roddy Piper, this shouldn't surprise you. His wild man persona was very much how he was in the real world, and during the 80s he almost lost his life after an altercation with a fan in Raleigh, North Carolina. Speaking about it in a documentary from 2006, Piper made it very clear he had a big rule in life, which was, first rule of a knife fight, don't take your eyes off the knife. Sadly, he then followed that up with, I broke that rule once, I stopped, boom, and it got me an inch from the heart. Hot damn. Once again, his reputation precedes him, as instead of crumpling to the floor, Roddy simply chased his attacker until he was sure the police had him detained at gunpoint. Piper went on to say that this was the closest I've ever seen somebody get shot, and that the policeman that had the pistol had it pointed towards his head. Thankfully, nobody would die, but what on earth would have happened if the Scotsman had caught up to him before the cops? You honestly never knew exactly what he was going to do. Number 2, Bobby the Brain Heenan. Bobby Heenan was one of a kind. One of the very best no matter what he turned his hand to in the pro wrestling industry. A time that many fans forget about is when he was stood side by side with the legendary Nick Bockwinkel. What happened with those two was just nuts. Going down in January 1975, it began when the AWA came to Chicago. The plan, as ever, was for the Brain to interrupt the main event as he had done time and time again in order to save his man's championship belt. One person had seen this too much though, and decided to take matters into his own hands. And they did this by revealing a gun and firing it into the ring. Thankfully, the heels escaped unscathed, but some of the other fans didn't. In all the commotion, as Heenan would later explain, some people were shot in the chest, neck, and thumb. There's that thumb again. Somehow this guy was never arrested, which is crazy, and led some to think it was just another wrestling angle. That wasn't true, although to be fair, there is no video evidence of this, so maybe a bunch of wrestlers made it up. It is what they do. Number 1, Harley Race. I don't think you're going to find many wrestlers who were seen as tougher than Harley Race. They don't make them like they used to anymore. Race was a permanent fixture of the NWA and a multiple-time world champion who took the belt and made it feel like the biggest deal ever. He would also often smoke 2 packs of cigarettes and down a crate of beer before his matches and not let him affect him at all, even if he was about to go for an hour. Harley Race was the man. It wasn't just in the ring, he practiced this though. This was just Harley. Back in 1965, Race was dining in Minneapolis when he saw another man slap a woman during an argument. Realizing this was wrong, which it was, Race stepped in and knocked the guy out with a single blow. Unfortunately, like many a babyface, he was utterly alone, not in a position to protect himself from this individual's friend, who stabbed him in the back using some of the restaurant's cutlery. Race had to be rushed to hospital where he was described as being in a fair condition, and mostly he was annoyed because he was going to have to miss that evening's show because of a stupid knife. And yeah, I get it, tying it into the title, this wasn't strictly a fan, but come on. It's a good story, and just shows you why wrestlers feared Harley like they did. He wasn't messing around. Know of any other wrestlers who were nearly killed by fans? And hopefully you don't, because this should never happen, but let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Then head over to whatculture.com and read yourself some articles. Follow What Culture on Twitter, What Culture WWE, and watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture. I appreciate your time, and I will talk to you again soon.